Tonight's encounter comes to you from long ago. We're pulling this one out of the vault. Dear Nance, I prefer remaining anonymous. In 1976 or 77, the Moraine, Ohio police made the 11 o'clock news main story, having sighted a UFO and chasing it as it headed south, just off to one side of I-75, following it more than halfway to Cincinnati before being called off. The following Saturday, I was riding with an officer friend of mine. A friend of his, who was also an officer in Eaton, Ohio, told us about answering a radio call that someone was in the backyard a few blocks away. A second officer met him there. This officer went to one side of the house where a large boat was parked. He had a bit of difficulty getting past the boat. The officer telling us about this said they entered through a gate on the north side of the house. He said he only went a few steps into the backyard, and maybe 20 feet away, he was looking at what he described as a Bigfoot. He said it had to be 8 feet tall. He said he had his service weapon drawn and cocked, but he said he couldn't fire. He explained, and he said, "We stood there, and we looked at each other for what seemed an eternity." But then the Bigfoot turned and walked to a 48-inch frame fence, put his hand on the fence, pushing it down, then stepped over into a thick woods, disappearing in a couple of steps. His partner just got a glimpse as it stepped into the woods. At this point, my friend said that he was making it up. The officer then handed my friend the official report, signed by his supervisor and the chief. He said that he had to have a psych exam, but he said it was okay. Now he was able to sleep a little better. I have not seen the big guy myself, but my daughter recently sent me a picture of a footprint in the mud at the Germantown Reserve. We prefer to live and let live. So that's it. Take it for what it's worth. I enjoy listening to your stories. I admit a bit of apprehension sending this in. I don't take criticism well. I wouldn't have sent this if I thought it wasn't true. The officer was bothered talking about it. You could see it in his face. But he had been told that it was healthy to talk about it. Keep up the good work. Hi, Nance. I've finally gotten it together, and I'm emailing you. I will do my best to remember it all and tell it in the order as it happened that night. You know, you spend enough time out there in the woods, and sooner or later, weird stuff is going to happen, or you're going to hear some weird things. And yes, I've had weird things happen in the woods over the years that I couldn't explain, and I've heard even stranger things that don't resemble anything I know. But in all of my years, none of them made me think something was unnatural, like some UFOs or it was Bigfoot related or anything like that. I always just figured, if it was important, the good Lord will reveal to me what he wants me to know and understand in his own good time. As for the rest, I will leave it alone. But, and here's the but you've all been waiting for, but there came a night when I threw every thought like that out the truck window. If what happened that night was not Bigfoot activity, I truly have no idea on the face of this earth what it could be. Let me explain. My brother-in-law's sister's in-laws, and let me stop there and clarify because that sounds a mite confusing. We are in Kentucky, but nobody's intermarrying, I promise you. So here's how it goes. My brother-in-law, that is, the guy married to my sister, who is not my relation, well, his sister married a man whose family owns the land I'm going to be talking about. So to recap, it's the family of in-laws to the sister of the man my sister is married to. Now, boy, that's a mouthful. I hope you could understand it all. And I had to write that out 5 times so it seemed right. Well, I got to tell you, folks, I probably had to record that 10 times to get that right. Anyway, he goes on to say, I just wanted to be clear. Nobody's doing any intermarrying here, whether we're in Kentucky or not, which we are. This is my brother-in-law's sister's family of in-laws' land. Or it was then. It is not now. But I'll get to that. So at that time, they had a lot of acreage in Owsley County in Kentucky, where I'm at now. At the time, their house sat on Highway 11, right on the South Fork of the Kentucky River. Their land was all to the west and the northwest of Highway 11. Now, if you know that area at all, you know it's downright hilly, gulchy, and woods are so thick you can't see under the trees in the best of daylight. Them's dark woods there, as we say. But those woods are also full of squirrel, rabbits, deer, and almost every other critter you can think of, including a really big one that I didn't know existed until one night. I had a standing permission slip, if you will, to hunt those woods any time I wanted to do so. All I was supposed to do is stop in and let her in-laws know, and I was supposed to share anything that I caught, as they're retired and they don't have much in the way of money and are always appreciative of extra meat for the freezer. You know, and that whole thing was something that people couldn't understand when I was in the Army. I was stationed overseas in Wiesbaden, Germany for a while, and if I was talking to somebody from, say, somewhere on the East Coast, they never did understand how it was that someone in Kentucky could be so poor money-wise, but own 100 acres of land. Why don't they just sell that land and get them some money, they would always say. And it really baffled a lot of the Germans that I got to know when they found out my family actually had over 70 acres at that time. It really blew some of the Brits away when I stayed in England for 6 weeks. Now, at the time, my grandparents were still living there on that 70 acres, and I was still sending them money to help cover taxes every year. It just didn't make sense to most people, but it's a Kentucky thing. I just thought I'd explain that. Heck, I think it's a thing anywhere but on the coasts and in the big cities in the USA. A lot of American families, they've owned that land for generations, you see. They don't owe a dime on it, except to pay taxes every year. They are land rich, but bank poor. And they're stubborn, and most would rather die than sell that land, unless it's to other family. They just know otherwise some old developer's going to come in, throw up a bunch of cardboard houses, and sell them at ridiculous prices. So anyway, that's how my sister's in-laws family was. They were land rich, bank poor. So the understanding was if I caught something on their land, and I most often did, I always shared with them. And truth be told, more than once or twice, I truly gave them the lion's share. So, now you know how I came to be in deep woods back in November 2014. I was going to be doing some bow hunting. I was going after some deer. Trail cams that had been set up for a while showed good game was right near a gulch that trickled with a creek water sometimes. Now, the banks of that gulch creek had thick blackberry brambles. They were so thick you couldn't see through them. The blackberries also drew in a lot of game. And those blackberries, they sure made good jam a few times for us. And yes, I shared that with the in-laws too. They were the ones who told me where to find them. They used to go in and get the blackberries themselves, but they're just too old now, and almost all of their young'uns are moved away. But me and their one son, the brother-in-law married to my sister, were good friends, and we did a lot of times hunting together on that land. But for some reason, He wasn't with me this time. I don't remember why. It didn't matter none. I used to go there alone a lot, like I said. I had a standing permission slip to go any time I wanted. All I had to do was be respectful. And here's something else that you should know about me. I'm a very strange person. I like being in the dark. It does not scare me one bit and never has. In fact, I learned to love it and use it to my advantage at Fort Leonard Wood when they would try to scare us all with night exercises when I was in the Army. Most of the guys with me, they'd be out there in the dark, all but crapping in their drawers. Not me. I felt alive at night. I swear, I heard better. I could smell things much stronger. I was not scared in the dark. I relished it. And when my time came and I went home from the Army, I made a beeline that very first month home in America to go spend a few nights out in the woods alone. American woods, they're very unique. There's nothing like them. Not in Germany, not in Britain, nowhere I have been anywhere in the world. I tell you, the American woods, they're deep, they're dark, they're vast, they're different. You see, I had just come home from Iraq, and my family, they were concerned when I said I was going to go out and spend a lot of time in the woods alone. They'd heard a lot, read a lot, and, well, they had some misconceptions about it all. But all I really needed to clear my head was the quiet, cool night time in those Kentucky mountains. And boy, did I get right as rain fast. Now, I keep going on and writing about everything but what happened. I reckon there might be a reason for that somewhere. Maybe. So I knew where all the trail cams had shown that the game was going to and fro. I had staked out already where I wanted to be that day. We had blinds and we had deer stands all over Gulch Creek and the whole mountain. It was kind of like our own critter highway on any given day. After all that time that we had the trail cams up, you'd figure we'd know if there was something like a Bigfoot out there, right? Well, you'd think. But it didn't show it, and we didn't know. The only thing we ever noticed looking back was that the game out there was changing its behavior all through September and October. But hey, who can explain what animals do, right? So I get out there late one afternoon. I'm fixing to set up a tent, and I'm going to spend the night out there. Then I'm going to get in my stand near the creek long before dawn. That's the plan. So I got set up. The sun was just going down. It's November, so it's already dark by 6 o'clock, you know. But right off, something felt different, and I couldn't say what. I wasn't there to stay up all night, so I hadn't collected piles of firewood, and I didn't have roaring fires all night. Again, I like the dark. I did sit out for a while and got warm around the fire before I got in my tent for the night. The night was clear and cold. There were a lot of stars out. I wasn't asleep yet, and I heard a howling sound rip through the night. I sat right up in my tent and I thought, what in heck is that? I sat and I listened carefully in the dark of my tent. That was no coyote. I know them, and I know wolves. The howl I heard, that had come from a big set of lungs behind it. This wasn't about being loud. This howl had real force behind it. You only get that with a big set of powerful lungs. What animal out there had lungs like that? I didn't know. Black bears didn't sound that big, I know. What I heard came from the north of my tent. I guessed 100 yards out. I sat in the tent, and I got my pistol and made sure it was handy. I carry a Kimber 10mm. That's good for any black bears that roam these hills. But what I was hearing, That wasn't no bear, I thought. I was sure of that. I listened, and I heard a few more howls. They were coming from the position to the north still. These howls would start low, and they wound up in volume and pitch. Then they would stop abruptly, like someone yanking the needle off of a record. Then it would start up again in less than a minute. 5 more howls right in a row came from the north position. Then roughly 2 minutes passed in total silence. I mean, not a single peep of normal night forest noise was out there. I was just about to try to settle back in when there was howling starting again. But my hair prickled on my neck. It was to the west this time. Now either this was moving and really fast, or there was another one of whatever it was out there. Suddenly, I hear these incredible crashes in the dark. They were coming from the north where the howls came from the first time, not where I had just heard them coming from now. I'm listening to the direction, and I can't tell which way the crashes are heading. All the while, I've got this nagging in my brain. Yeah, it had felt wrong earlier, and this felt doubly wrong. While in Iraq, I had gotten really good at listening to my gut, and it had helped me getting home in one piece without losing any limbs. I reckon since getting home, I had let my gut feelings get lazy and weak, because I know I should have already caught on there was some bad juju, or whatever you want to call it, going on out there. But no, I sat there in my tent, in the dark, pistol in my lap, just listening. The howling had stopped again, and I thought, well, good, I hope that's over. I'd really like to get some sleep. But nope, not happening. Now I think about it, and I believe those howls, they were challenges between 2 males. I really believe that now after thinking about it. Because somewhere out there, that north howler and the west howler, they came in contact. They engaged each other in serious combat. If it was a mating thing, well, they're pretty violent maters, and I can't think anybody is going to reproduce. I don't think that's what it was, though. I believe it was combat. The ruckus towards the west, my gosh, it was insane. There were snarls and screams, thumps, crashing. You'd have thought 2 dinosaurs were over there just fighting it out. Things were breaking, and there was so much noise. I couldn't even understand all I was hearing. And there were definitely 2 of them. They had distinctive vocal sounds. If you want to, you can call them voices. And I could hear them overlap. A couple of times there'd be a break in the fighting, and you could hear them out there still moving. They were loud and noisy. And then I heard what finally kicked my gut into gear. I realized they were talking. Not like any talking I'd ever heard, though, and I've heard all kinds of foreign languages all around this globe on my many travels, courtesy of Uncle Sam. But I'm telling you, this did not sound a thing like any human language. Now, some call it chatter, but I don't agree. I don't think that word quite fits. I don't know what I want to call it, but it was much more distinct than chatter. They were going back and forth like that while they were out there moving around. And then you would hear the fighting start again. I have to say, I really had some pucker factor going on when their fighting and thrashing and moving had them coming my way. I did not want to be in the path of whatever these things were. Yeah, I had my gun, and that would be good use against a bear. But I don't think it would help me against 2 bears at once in the darkness, and that isn't even factoring whatever these were. And I knew only one thing for sure right then, that I didn't know at all what these things were. I had a strong instinct kicking me. I wanted to get up in a tree. I did not want to be down there on the ground. I felt very vulnerable. I don't know why or where it came from or what formed that thought, but I remember clearly the urge hitting me. Get in a tree now. I sleep with my boots on, as we used to say overseas, and I was out of that tent in a flash. I did grab my hunting vest as I was getting out. It had all my really important stuff in it. I got my mini mag light out, scoped the tree closest to me with a branch low enough to grab, and I started shimmying up, and I did turn the light off. I don't think I had climbed a tree since I was a boy, but it was like I was 10 years old again. I went up that tree so fast. I felt around in the dark for the next limb and the next limb, and I only clicked on my light once or twice more to make sure it was a good limb. I didn't want the light to draw attention. I got about 12 feet up, and I found a spot to sit, and I felt secure. Now, the whole time I'm thinking, what in the world is that out there? And what in the world is going on? It was like nothing I had ever heard, and I couldn't get past my gut screaming at me as it was doing. It had been slow and delayed in getting my attention, but once that gut voice of mine kicked back in, it was as strong as it ever had been. Now, as I listened, I was alarmed to realize they had gotten closer, maybe 40 or 50 yards from me, but still too far for me to see, even if I managed to turn my light on, which I was not going to do again. The sounds I heard were terrible. I thought then that I was listening to a fight to the death between, well, I don't know what they were. Prehistoric howling animals? Jurassic monsters that were over there snapping trees? Now, I've hunted moose, elk, you name it. I've seen moose battle, and what I was hearing was way more intense than that. Sitting up there in that tree, I was thinking over every animal that I ever knew, and nothing fit what I was hearing. This went on and on. They would stop combat for a little while. It was like boxers going over to their own corners and getting a drink before getting back into the middle of the ring to fight again. And during those combat breaks, I would hear them vocalizing, and there were definitely 2 of them. I listened carefully. It was so funny because it was like they were talking smack to each other during the downtime. It was like, I'm going to whoop your butt, and the other would come back and say, I'd like to see you try, buddy. That kind of smack talk, that teams do or fighters do. And they were definitely answering each other. They were starting to sound more breathy and more hoarse now, but they were still talking and answering each other. During one of the down times, I clicked my watch on to see the time. It was 12:08 a.m. I had turned into my tent somewhere around 10 p.m. I'll say that all of this started probably 11 p.m. So this had been going on for roughly an hour by that point. And I could tell they were getting tired. It was just like prize fighters going 10 rounds. The clashing, it was still happening, but each combat time seemed to last a little less and a little less. But something happened out there. They moved further to the south of my position in the tree, but yet they were closer. My best guess in the dark, what I was hearing, was 25 to 30 yards to my south. So they had arced all around me and my camp. But like I said, something big happened. There was a break in the fighting. Then they started fighting again. Then I heard some terrible howls. These were pain-filled howls. These were not angry howls. There was no tough guy bravado in the back of those howls like I had been hearing earlier in the night. Then I only heard one howler. He was still crashing around, but there was something that had happened. Something was different. Now I believe one of them was either killed or close to being dead, because I never heard the second vocalize again. Not a different howl, not a different chatter, if you want to call it chatter. But I did hear a deep rumble like a breathing. If you've ever heard a male lion calling at dusk with those forceful lung calls where they push all the air out of their lungs, you'll get what I mean. It's not a roar. It's not a throat or a vocal cord thing. It's lungs vibrating when they exhale as it goes up and out your throat. The one remaining whatever out there did that several times, and each time it got louder and more powerful. It wasn't calling. It's like it was drawing more breath in to its lungs, getting ready for something. And it did. It must have gotten its lungs full, because what came next almost shook me out of that tree. A screeching roar was let out, unlike any other I had heard that night. It hit me up in that tree like it was a solid thing coming right at me, like a nuclear blast hitting a house. After the shock of that roar, I clung to the tree and waited for worse. But there was no worse to come. It was over. The rest of the dark hours, I sat in that tree, and I listened, and I could still hear it moving around down there from time to time. It did not, as far as I'm aware, come anywhere near where my tent was. I don't know what it was doing, but I have to think that it must have been moving its dead opponent. Maybe it was tearing it apart. Maybe it was eating it. I don't know. I clicked my watch on again around 2 a.m. because I heard more of those weird vocalizations. But these were different. They were calling out, and there was some whistling. There was no fighting. And if I had to take a stab at it, that big final roar, I think that's what he used to call his clan or his family in. That was his victory yell. He let them know he won. I think, between all of them together, they worked to get rid of the body of the dead one. Yes, I know. That sounds totally crazy, completely bonkers. I had no way of knowing what was going out there in the dark, that's true. But it's the only thing that fits with all of the other evidence that I found in the morning. Now, needless to say, I did not head out at 4 a.m. to get in my spot down by the creek with the blackberry brambles like I had planned. In fact, I did not get out of that tree until after 8 a.m., when I had perfect visibility. I had heard them move off in the darkness hours before. I was pretty sure they were completely gone. But one thing that I learned in Iraq, even when you think the coast is clear and it's safe, you wait 10 minutes more. And then if you can, you wait 10 or 20 more after that. When I did finally get down out of that tree, I had to answer the call of nature something terrible. I'd been holding it hard for at least 2 hours. I got my stuff together, and I was about to leave that area, and a strange, calm thought came through my head. That I could not leave. If I left without looking into that area, I would forever regret it. And just like that, I calmly set everything back down, and I started walking in the direction of all that ruckus I'd heard all through the night. There'd been a battle there, all right. There were huge areas flattened, whole dried bushes uprooted and looked like they'd been thrown here and there, limbs broken off trees, and a few of those limbs had been thrown like big pointy javelins. There were quite a few sticking in the ground at different angles. Out on the periphery of the fight zones, I saw imprints that I was certain were footprints, even though the ground was still hard, and they were very large, barefooted footprints. That's when the one thought that had came to me after it got quiet finally that night, well, that thought came right back to me. Bigfoot. I did think about that in the darkness as I sat in the tree in the silence. I had never believed in such things. How many decades had I slept out in the woods? How many nights had I walked in total darkness, just feeling my way around out there because I liked it. I liked the challenge. It was more than I could be counting. And wasn't it true that in my whole life, every man I ever knew growing up and knew currently that I respected as serious hunters and serious men with knowledge of the woods, had I ever heard one do anything other than scoff or snicker when Bigfoot would be talked about? Not a single one said they believed in Bigfoot or that they had encountered him. Why would I think it was real? And never once in all my life had I had something I couldn't explain, rationalize away, or at least just walk away saying, wow, that was weird, and leave it at that. But this was different. And I don't know why the thought of Bigfoot came, but it did. And it came to me clear as a bell before I got down out of that tree, and it would not leave my mind. I think that's why I had to stop, drop everything, and go see for myself. I did not see any blood in the area, but I wasn't looking that close. I bet there was blood or hair all over the place. I probably just didn't see it with dawn's light. I saw what I needed to see there. It was enough. I was getting out of there. And for the record, I have been back hunting in that same location many, many times since. And I have seen and heard nothing. Diddly squat is what I have seen and heard, other than things I was hunting. I made myself get right back out there the next weekend that this happened. I figured it was like falling off a horse. If I didn't get my butt back out there, I never would. But I'm glad I did. And here's an even bigger piece for your big record. When my sister's elderly in-laws passed on within a year of each other, just a few years back, she bought the land. Well, she bought half, and I bought the other half. So my sister and her husband are now living in his elderly parents' old house out on Highway 11. Me? I put me a trailer right up on my part of the land. And yes, sir, my part of the land is the one with the Gulch Creek and the blackberries and where the big fight happened. I sit out in the dark now on my back deck many, many nights, and I just listen. A couple of times my skin prickled again because I thought I heard some howls off in the distance. They were so distant, they could have been all the way over in Lee County from the sound of them. But I heard them nonetheless. And that's as close as I've heard them. But I'm always listening, and I'm always watching now, and I'd advise you to do the same. And while I still love the dark, I have a lot more respect for what might also like to be out there in the dark, in the woods, here in Kentucky. Signed, Mike.